Welcome to training number 1 in the roadmap to reuse. This training is called Reuse Wins. Our goal is to significantly change the throwaway culture, but this change won't happen unless leaders in our communities and their constituents understand why reusable is better than disposable, even better than recyclable or compostable for the planet and also for the business bottom line. And that's where you come in. You can learn from this training and use it to teach others why reuse wins both for the planet and for local businesses. This training is available as a downloadable slide deck. We recommend that you customize it to talk about how people in your community or networks can get involved in promoting or advocating for reuse. You can choose to incorporate slides from the other trainings in the roadmap to reuse to highlight things like the new reuse economy and policies that prioritize reuse, or the connection to climate and reuse and how to organize for reuse. This is training number 1 in the roadmap to reuse. It's called Reuse Wins. The plastic pollution crisis and the dramatic impacts of climate change are directly linked to our throwaway culture and treating the planet's resources and its people as disposable. One of the best ways to tackle plastic pollution and consumption-related greenhouse gas emissions is to transition our throwaway culture to the new reuse economy. And research demonstrates unequivocally that reusable products are a win for the planet and for the business bottom line compared to disposable ones. And when factoring in the ability of reuse to address plastic pollution and toxic chemicals exposure, as well as the economic benefits for businesses, reuse is a win for the planet and for local business and for people as well. So that is what we are going to be talking about in the next few minutes. Now, using products for just a few minutes before they become waste is not a sustainable form of consumption for a planet of 7.8 billion people and growing. Disposable products that harm the planet by every measure of environmental impact, from resource extraction to loss of biodiversity to air and water pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, water consumption, and as well as the harm associated with excessive waste, aren't sustainable. The throwaway economy is a system in which 15% of wood that is harvested, 22% of aluminum mined, 40% of plastic that is created, and 50% of glass produced goes primarily to make single-use packaging that is consumed often in a matter of minutes before it gets trashed, recycled, or littered. This system justifies the unnecessary extraction of precious natural resources on the front end while creating significant amounts of waste and pollution impacts on the back end. This system treats the resources and people of the planet as disposable. According to the Global Footprint Network, we are currently using up the resources of 1.7 Earths. Unless things change, we'll need 3 Earths by 2050. If everyone consumed resources at the rate of the United States, we'd actually need 5 Earths to support the world's population. That was in 2015 when the World Watch Institute reported that the US was 5% of the world's population, but consumed 25% of the world's resources. But there's some good news. A new reuse economy is emerging where consumer products are delivered in reusable packaging. These systems are becoming the foundation for a circular economy that stewards the resources we take from the planet and keeps them in closed regional loops for as long as possible, minimizing natural resource extraction, preventing waste and pollution, and creating local economic job opportunities. The new reuse economy treats both people and the planet as indisposable. That means that single-use packaging and products that are part of the make, take, dispose linear product life cycle are replaced with reusable and refillable systems where the infrastructure is created for the systems that are needed to collect, wash, and return reusable packaging to the original location. So packaging isn't a product that becomes waste. It's actually part of a service offered to deliver consumers the goods that they want to consume. And it's durable and doesn't become waste for a long time, if ever. While single-use packaging is used for all kinds of consumer products, we focus on prioritizing the transition of food and beverage packaging to reusable for a variety of reasons. The first is that data shows that food and beverage packaging escapes the waste management system into the environment more than any other product type. While as an individual item, smoking litter has always topped the charts of Coastal Cleanup Day data. Looking more closely, we see that grouped together, about 75% of the top 10 littered items during Coastal Cleanup Day are food and beverage packaging. Meanwhile, other litter studies show that about 70% of the products that are littered on city streets, which wash through storm drains and out to nearby waterways, is comprised of single-use food and beverage packaging. All of this food packaging waste that enters the environment results from today's one-way throwaway model for delivering food and beverages to consumers, starting with the extractive systems for creating the raw materials to purchase disposable foodware items, to the waste and litter generated and the money spent managing all that waste. Looking at food service packaging overall, the numbers are astounding. Based on market research data, Upstream reported in the Reuse Wins report that the food service industry uses nearly 1 trillion pieces of disposable foodware each year and spends $24 billion on purchasing them. These products generate 9 million tons of waste, and local government spends $6 billion a year managing the resulting waste. Not only that, but about 20 billion food and beverage packaging items escape waste management and become litter that local governments are spending over $11.5 billion annually to clean up. And when we think about this problem of disposable foodware, most people think that the solution lies in getting rid of plastics. And that's because most people associate the throwaway culture issue with plastic pollution. And indeed, this is a significant crisis. 11 million metric tons of plastics each year enter the world's oceans. Without significant action, there may be more plastic than fish in the ocean by weight by the year 2050. People know plastic is bad. It's killing fish, whales, turtles, even threatening human health, as we discover that we're eating lots of plastic particles each year, inhaling plastic particles, and recent studies show that plastics may be accumulating in the major organs of the body. But the question is banning plastic products the right solution for these problems, for the throwaway culture? Banning single-use plastic will help solve plastic pollution problems, but the consequences of focusing only on one disposable material type is that the alternative single-use materials have a host of environmental and human health impacts that mean that we're really just shifting impacts. The alternative single-use materials can be just as devastating and sometimes worse. In this way, when they are worse, we call them regrettable substitutes. And these regrettable substitutes demonstrate that the problem isn't just plastic, it's single use itself. For example, bio-based plastics made from plants like corn or starchy crops require fossil fuels to grow in an industrial agricultural system. And that means loads of fertilizers and energy inputs. The fertilizers pollute ground and surface water, creating contributing to the big dead zones in our inland and coastal waterways that result from contaminated agricultural runoff. And many people think that aluminum, which is highly recyclable, is a good alternative. Now, while aluminum cans may contain an average of 73% recycled content, that non-recycled or virgin aluminum is very harmful from a carbon emissions lens. It's 5 times more carbon intensive than the recycled content. And the mining of virgin aluminum releases perfluorocarbons that are 9,200 times more harmful than CO2. And in the age-old question of paper versus plastic, the answer is neither. Half of all the paper produced each year is for packaging, and that results in cutting down 3 billion trees per year. Trees are our precious defense against carbon emissions. They act as a carbon sink, consuming CO2, and also provide cooling for a warming planet, plus clean air, habitat for diverse wildlife, and clean water. Wood is also, such as bamboo, used as a single-use product, is very much like an agricultural product. It can have devastating environmental impacts as bamboo is grown in a monoculture agricultural system that results in loss of biodiversity, soil erosion, and runoff polluted by fertilizers and excessive sediments. Aside from banning single-use plastic, another way many policies and programs focus on trying to solve this waste problem is by making products more recyclable and compostable. But it turns out that there's a lot of mythology around the potential of these waste-oriented type solutions. Recyclable products are only better 56% of the time based on extensive thousands of studies evaluated by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. And that's because most recovered materials are downcycled or end up in landfill and incineration, especially foodware, because it's generally too contaminated to be recycled into new products. And compostable products are also a bit of a myth. Compostable foodware is a contaminant that lowers the quality of compost and often contains many toxic substances that pollute or contaminate the compost that we grow our food in. Most commercial composters don't want foodware, especially plastic compostables, which get selected out and sent to landfill, where they have 30 times more greenhouse gas input than composted food and organic waste. Really, these are the only things we should be sending to compost facilities: food, land, yard waste, and other organic non-packaging waste. In addition to the fact that making products more recyclable and compostable doesn't always result in environmentally beneficial recyclable or compostable materials, another problem is that focusing on how we manage waste once it's created doesn't reduce the ever increasing production of single-use products. As you can see from this chart, production vastly outpaces recycling, and we can see that way more products are disposed and incinerated than actually recycled. That's why it's important to shift the focus and prioritize waste prevention or source reduction. As the old 2 R's of solid waste tells us, the 3 R's of solid waste tells us, we should focus on source reduction, which is the reduce and reuse parts of the 3 R's. First, we need to focus on those first and prioritize reduce and reuse. And once we've done that as much as possible, then we need to find the best ways to manage the waste. When prioritizing reduce and reuse, we are preventing waste from ever being generated in the first place. The 2 main ways to prevent waste at the source are to eliminate unnecessary stuff and then transition the rest to reusable, refillable formats. It makes sense that eliminating unnecessary products and switching to reusables are better for people and the planet than disposable products. It makes common sense, but we wanted to know if the technical data and information would bear this out. So we looked at a range of reports that compare disposable and reusable foodware products and found that this was true by every environmental measure. In Upstream's 2021 Reuse Wins report, we reviewed 16 life cycle analyses, or LCAs, that compare reuse versus single-use foodware. That's cups, containers, plates, and utensils. LCAs are currently the only technical methodology for assessing the environmental impacts of products. They generally consider as many as 14 different environmental measures of environmental impact, including resource consumption, land use impacts, biodiversity impacts, air and water quality impacts, energy and water consumption, global warming potential, greenhouse gas emissions, and waste impacts. Criticized for what they don't measure, including plastic pollution, litter, and toxic chemical exposure impacts to health, LCAs are still the only methodology we have to assess the cradle-to-grave impacts of products. So the first finding of the Reuse Wins report was that, on balance, the weight of the evidence demonstrates that reusables beat disposables by most environmental measures. For plates versus clamshells and in cup studies, only one LCA showed that disposables were better. You can see the winners marked here by trophies. The weight of the evidence, again, shows that reusables are better than disposables. An important concept to understand regarding the environmental impacts of reusables is that they need to be used enough times to be more environmentally beneficial compared to disposables, because reusable products are more material intensive. So one-to-one compared to a disposable product, a reusable product will be worse for the environment. But reusables are designed for many more uses than single-use or disposables. So there's something called the break-even point, which is the number of times a reusable product needs to be used to break even in terms of environmental impact with a disposable product. And once you use the reusable beyond that break-even point, the benefits begin to accrue. Life cycle analyses, LCAs, help us to understand the break-even points. For ceramic versus paper and polystyrene cups, for example, the break-even point ranges from 2 to 122 uses. For glass versus paper cups, the break-even point is 36 uses, and on. Now, we highlight a wide range. We highlight how reusables are better for climate and better through a water consumption lens in the Reuse Wins report. And we found that reuse is better for the climate in almost every life cycle analysis. Cups, for example, we evaluated the LCAs of cups, and we found that disposable paper, plastic, and bioplastic cups are 3 to 10 times higher in CO2 impact than reusable ceramic, stainless steel, and glass, by significant margins. If you look at the carbon emissions of food serviceware, for example, for plates and clamshells, a disposable fiber Vaste clamshell has 68 times higher carbon impact than reusable polypropylene clamshells if the clamshell is used 360 times. Comparing paper versus porcelain plates, the CO2 impact of the porcelain plate used 1,000 times had a fraction of the CO2 impact of 1,000 disposable polypropylene, polystyrene, bio-based polylactic acid made from corn, and cellulose fiber plates. And reusables generally have a lower water footprint over their life cycle, particularly glass and ceramic. Stainless steel has about the same water impact, but reusable cups, plates, and utensils generally save water. For cups, glass and ceramic consume way less than stainless steel over their lifetime. Most of the water impact is in the use phase during dishwashing, and most of the water impacts of disposables are in the extraction and production phases. So 1-to-1, as I said before, a reusable cup would have a bigger water footprint than a disposable one, but reusables are used many, many more times. Over their life cycle, over their lifetime, a reusable has a much lower water footprint. So we calculated that 500 paper cups consumes 370 gallons of water, whereas one ceramic cup used 500 times only consumes 53 gallons of water. So over their lifetime, ceramic cups, which generally last for more than 1,000 uses, have a much lower water footprint. Then the next finding of the Reused Wins report is that reuse benefits local food service businesses economically. The Rethink Disposable program, launched by Clean Water Fund in 2012, has worked with over 260 food businesses to help them voluntarily switch to reusables. Most of them chose to switch only a few items to reuse, and 100% of the businesses saved money when switching to reusables based on net costs or cost savings. On average, the program reports that businesses save from $3,000 to $22,000 per year. They also reduced waste between 1,300 and 2,200 pounds on average. The number of disposable foodware items eliminated per business ranged from 110,000 to 225,000 items per year. If all restaurants did this, just imagine what that would mean in terms of reducing the waste management and litter costs for cities. Now, when Environmental Defense Fund performed a study for Starbucks, they found that if a typical, and this was in 2000, they found that if a typical Starbucks cafe sold 10 drinks per hour in reusable cups, they'd save over $6,000 per year. The reusable cups would also cut the life cycle water consumption by over 8,000 gallons of water per year. Greenhouse gas emissions would be reduced by over 1,000 pounds, and waste would also be reduced by over 1,000 pounds. And that was using dishwashing systems that are much less efficient than those in use today. One insight researchers gained was that cafes generally had unused dishwashing capacity. Therefore, no additional dishwashers needed to be installed. A similar finding was made in other studies. Research conducted for the city of Quebec showed the cost of reusable mugs versus disposable polyethylene lined paper cups for restaurants. This chart shows that in terms of cost to the restaurant of disposable cups versus ceramics, reuse wins whether you have an old or a modern dishwasher. Scenario A shows the cost of 500 reusable mugs washed with a high efficiency commercial dishwashing system, compared to scenario B with mugs used 100 times in a generic dishwasher. Of course, the cost of purchase the cost of purchase also has to be factored in. And the water, energy, and labor associated with washing foodware is the other cost. And many people think that switching to reusables will cost restaurants enormous amounts of money because they'll have to install dishwashers. But generally, this isn't true. The truth is that nearly all restaurants that serve food and beverage have some type of installed dishwashing, either a 3-sink hand washing system or a commercial automated system. In Seattle, 76% of businesses have commercial dishwashing systems installed, and many of them are already using reusables at quite high rates, from 68% for bowls and higher. And similar to the Starbucks study in Seattle and the Seattle study, Rethink Disposable has found that most restaurants have adequate installed dishwashing capacity. For example, Rethink Disposable worked with the city of Alameda to unpackage all their restaurants. With 80 participating restaurants, only 3 needed to expand their dishwashing capacity to transition from disposables to reusables, and still all of them saved money. And our research of the cost of reusables compared to disposables found that the purchase costs of reusables are much lower. For example, one 9-inch ceramic plate costs $1.39. The lifetime usage of that plate, assumed to be 1,000 uses based on LCAs we reviewed, means that if we looked at 1,000 comparable disposable plates and their cost, the cost would range from from close to $13 to close to $37 for those disposable plates, depending on the type of product. So therefore, a ceramic plate is way cheaper on average than disposable paper plates lined with plastics. After about 9 uses, the costs become much higher for the disposables. So to close, the new reuse economy for food service can save businesses and local government a lot of money, reduce waste and litter, and benefit the environment. In Reuse Wins, we found that if we shift to on-site dining for to reusables for on-site dining, and build out the new reuse infrastructure in cities where 82% of the population resides, we can remove 86% of disposables from the system. That means eliminating 840 million pieces of packaging, saving businesses $5 billion in operational costs, and communities $5 billion in waste management costs. In addition, this new reuse economy would eliminate 17 billion pieces of litter and create lots of local jobs that create a just transition away from the polluting, extraction-based single-use system in place today. And with your help, we can do this. If you are inspired and you want to learn more, there's all kinds of ways to do so. At Upstream, we support those who want to start local reuse coalitions, and we host national conversations, including with NGOs and businesses in the National Reuse Network, and with government folks in the Government Reuse Forum. I highly encourage you to join these forums, to sign up for our weekly email newsletter, and check out the Indisposable podcast so you can keep track of the exciting ways in which the new reuse economy is unfolding. And finally, if you want to learn more about bringing reuse to your community, you can check out the resources available on our website and our live streams and our blogs and our vlogs and through our social media accounts. Thanks so much. We hope that the Reuse Wins training is of value to you in your work and will be something that you can use to train others.